Welcome to Australian Hunger. I am your host Ben. On today's show I've got an interview with Jen from Divine Ascension. Their new album The Uncovering is out now. Really cool stuff. I'm not necessarily attracted in general to bands in this kind of category, which they're not specifically symphonic metal, but I think they definitely draw heavily from that genre. But when bands do it well, like Divine Ascension, like Epica as well, I don't think it matters whether you like the genre or not, or you like some of the particular trappings of the genre. If it's done well, it's done well, and Divine Ascension definitely do their music well. Before I get to that, I want to talk a little bit about, in the way I always do, talk a little bit around an incident that happened a couple of days ago. So, Bring Me the Horizon had a show, and a fan died. There's been a lot of speculation about whether it was a fault of security, but there has been no cause of death, so I think me commenting on that doesn't actually help anything, and yeah, it would be a bit irresponsible given that no one really knows anything at this stage. What I do find interesting regarding the idea of danger and a live show is that there is a certain category of people who always like to comment that people should toughen up, people should, get over it, it's a heavy metal show, it's supposed to be rough. But I think this really puts it in perspective that for most shows, no one's going to get really hurt, no one's going to die. But there's always a risk. There's always a risk when you're getting lots of people in a particular venue and there's some sort of movement going on. There's a risk, and that really needs to be taken seriously. And whether you fall on the divide of heavy metal shows should be a quiet affair with people enjoying somberly, or people should be out there and rough and tumbling, it should be stressed that there's danger, and I don't think people should just paper over that by saying, "Oh, it's how it is. That's part of a metal show. Get over it." No, there's actual danger, and people should really take that seriously. And I think even if you want to be in a mosh and be moshing quite hard, there's nothing wrong with taking the element of safety seriously. You can still have a great show and ensure that you're not behaving dangerously, that you're not putting yourself or anyone else at risk. It may take a slight amount of spontaneity out of the whole thing, but to emphasise, people's lives can be at stake sometimes, and a metal show just isn't worth dying over. It can be really transformative events in people's lives, really meaningful experiences, but that means nothing if people get seriously hurt. And I think, there's an ongoing conversation about where that line should be drawn, but fundamentally safety really needs to be taken into account. Now, the interview. I talked to Jen just earlier this evening, actually. I think this is possibly my quickest turnaround of an interview to date. Really enjoyed the album, The Uncovering, and we talked a little bit about the album, and also her really interesting background. So she comes from a non-metal background, a classically trained singer, learned jazz, piano, all that stuff. It's really interesting to talk to someone who enjoys the genre, is part of the genre, but also has experiences outside of it, hasn't just been a metal loyalist for life. Songs played during the interview. The first one is Pursuit of Desire, the second one is Vultures, and at the end we have Evermore. This is Jen Borg from Divine Ascension. This album, when did you guys start working on it?
Wow, good question. I think it's hard to remember. I think it would have been just before we headed off around Australia promoting our second album, Liberator. So I think for me it was, it really started there. All the ideas and everything were starting to come together before we really had even toured the second album. It was just kind of like a constant creative process for me. But a lot of the ideas didn't actually really come into fruition or become anything recognizable of what it is today until probably like early 2016. And that's when we started actually, kind of putting together what is the Uncovering now. But yeah, it always starts from like a few different little ideas here and there, and lyrical ideas and melodic ideas and guitar riffs, and then we just piece everything together and see what happens.
The thing about that always interests me is it kind of seems like with a lot of bands, it's kind of this forward momentum, like there's obviously going to be a next album. But going into that, do you have any intentions? Do you have any specific things you want to achieve, things that you want to, I don't know, perhaps do better or do differently than you did in the previous album?
I think there's always room for improvement and progression. I think progression, haha, pardon the pun. It's a progressive album. It's a progressive career, I suppose. It's like you're always learning. You want to, for me, I want to achieve more. I want to do it better. I want to learn more. I want to, kind of learn off other people doing awesome, cool stuff, listen, learn, progress, and create, and continuously move forward. I think it gives you a sense of drive, a sense of achievement, and it's hard in today's music industry, I suppose, because you're not necessarily getting a lot of financial compensation for what you love to do. It's really hard to live off music, and so it really is a love-driven thing, and so you've got to keep that kind of love in the music and in what you do, and get a sense of achievement out of it. So I think, actually pushing forward and keeping on getting something really amazing out of what you're doing is the only way through, really.
With all kind of hobbies that kind of go forward into some sort of more serious pursuit, there's definite times or definite aspects which aren't as pleasant as some of the others. What is it that for you that balances out some of the less pleasant aspects that really draws you and that you enjoy?
I think that's a really interesting question, because I suppose when you start out as a band, like I can go pretty much on my own experience from starting out with Divine Ascension and what it is today as what it was when we first started years and years ago. Like years and years ago, we would just get together every week. We would jam. We'd be playing music. We really kind of learn each other's musical style. It's very different to what we do now and today. And so in that sense today, when we create our music and then we kind of market it and we create shows, and then we've got to get our merchandise ready, plan tours, find people that we want to work with, get artists sorted. It kind of almost becomes a little bit of a business in that sense. Whereas when you first start out, it's kind of like a hobby. You're rocking up to rehearsal, you're stuffing around on other people's instruments and having fun, but it's very much, kind of let's get down to business and get this stuff done that we have to get done for our album. I don't actually find any particular part less enjoyable than another. But what I find about our band in particular is we all chip in and get the job done. So if there is a particular task that one person may not be so great at, then there's generally someone else in our band that is better at it, and they put their hand up to do that task. So I think it's we don't really have like a leader or, as such, that pushes out all of those different tasks and says, hey, Benjamin, you have to do this task. It's like we just share it and we all chip in and do our bit. And it works well, I think. And it makes, when you've got other people, when you've got support, I think nothing is too hard, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. In terms of you guys of interacting as a group musically, how do you guys go about, maybe in reference to this album more specifically, how do you guys go about writing the music between you?
It's a bit of a process in the cloud, actually, for us. We don't, for this, you're talking about this album in specific or more like in general over the years? It's very different from album to album. Um, let's, let's for this album, um, I think it was more, we had a cloud, like a drive where we could put all of our ideas, um, and we would literally all just have access to this drive and just load in lots of ideas and music. And we kept it really organized, would listen through everyone's ideas and pick at ideas, like grab something and go, oh, I want to work on that. And so we just kind of built ideas through collaboration, rather than getting together and jamming, because we found that when we were jamming, we would jam for hours, record it, and get maybe a little idea out of that. And we would all travel a very long way to get to each other to do that jam. And it kind of, we're kind of in a different place now, I suppose. We've all got families and, um, work and all that kind of stuff. And we want to try and fit everything in. And so for it to be sustainable, we just, like, literally, if we thought we were onto something good, we'd send a message out and go, hey guys, check this out. I've called this track number one, and, see what you think. If you can add to it, go for it. So it's just like giving everyone the ability to pull whatever they want apart or do whatever they want with whatever you've created, trusting that is okay as well.
No, it's fascinating because it's very much about like these very different. Like there's a continuation. Most of the members, you've got the sort of core members that have been there for, since the band's inception, and you've been going. You're still interested in playing this, the same music. Yet there's this definite sort of transition in the band. Just because the band kind of develops on its own inertia, and also the kind of material conditions in your life. I don't know, this kind of maybe a bit too hypothetical, but like, which is the preferable state? Like to be younger and more carefree and not as maybe structured, or to have that kind of more structured approach to the band?
Well, I think if it's asking in general, like, if you're saying, okay, well, what's the ultimate way to keep a band together and to make stuff work? You can just say, okay, well, I think it's really down to each individual group. We find that this works for us now at the moment. But maybe, if you're kind of a young gun band coming into the industry and you want to find your feet and you want to find your style and you want to find your thing, your passion, you want to work out whether it's working together, like maybe you need to be in the studio every week and you need to be recording each other and you need to be working in each other's pockets. But I think also as you work through all of these different things, like you write music or you perform a lot more or whatever, you kind of find your feet, you find where you fit in, you find where you want to be, and it just becomes a different process, I suppose. I think we've progressed quite naturally, like, from that kind of young group together, getting to know each other and getting to know what we wanted to create and what we wanted to play, through to jamming a lot, through to writing at each other's houses, through to now actually being able to email an idea through to somebody and say, hey, I know that you can make this work. This is for you, so yeah, I think it's, there's no particular preference. I think it's really like, yeah, it comes down to each individual group and what it takes to stay together, to make it work, to, I suppose also if we had a band member that particularly needed that, if we had a band member that said, hey, I need to see you guys every week, like this is my sanity, this is how we work together, this is how we make it work, then yeah, we might do things differently. But for now, this is working for us.
One thing that kind of stuck out to me about the album in particular was the keyboards. I think, and obviously correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, they had more of a symphonic approach in previous albums, whereas in this one there's very much an electronic approach, more of a I don't know how to describe the specific sound, but like more stuff that you'd hear in more kind of electronic music. Where did that kind of approach come from this album?
Well, we're a 4-piece, so we don't actually have a keyboard player. But when we were writing a lot of this stuff, we did have a keyboard player for a little while. So going into actually recording, the keyboards were written by myself, the guitarist Carl Insky, and Jason as well, the bass player. So I think also it's different because it wasn't jammed, if that makes sense. Like we had it had the sense of everything else together, and we just created the ambience that we wanted with the keys. We don't really have an intention to have a keyboard player live, I don't think, and not at this stage anyway. So yeah, I suppose in becoming a 4-piece, we knew what we wanted to do and we knew how we wanted to move forward, and we knew we still wanted to complete the album, even though parting ways with our keyboard player. So we just did what we had to do and created the keys. So in that different sound that you hear, it's probably just different influences. It's three people, myself, Carl and Jason, kind of putting all our ideas and influences together, rather than having one person necessarily in control of what happens with the keyboards.
Getting more around to the recording, and you sort of specifically recording the vocals for the album, something really fascinating that you did was you were doing some Facebook Lives of those sessions. When did you decide to take that approach?
I I saw someone do a live video on Facebook, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's really nerve-wracking." I thought it would be very, very nerve-wracking to do a live video, even just going onto Facebook and talking, live on Facebook. And then I was thinking about it more, and I was like, well, it's actually no more nerve-wracking than getting up in front of thousands of people and singing, isn't it? Like I was trying to find where I fitted in this kind of new age thing, I suppose. And I was like, well, maybe I am really nervous to do something like this, but maybe it also would be a very interesting experience to involve. I don't really know like what I was trying to get out of it, or what. I just thought it would be a little bit challenging. Add an extra step when you go into the studio with already pressure to complete something, and then stream it live and see what it feels like. Like I think it's my sense of setting myself a challenge to see, if I perform better under that stress of being streamed live on Facebook, or if I perform better not being under the public eye, or if there was anyone, that would give feedback while I was actually singing. Like I'm constantly looking for that, did that work? Does that sound okay? Should we do this? Should we do that? And I'm always asking of the engineer that I'm working with, or of my bandmates. So I thought, well, maybe if we say this, hey, like, guys, I'm here, I'm recording live. What do you think? Do you think it worked? Was it okay? Does it sound okay? So I think there's a few different elements in there, bit of a challenge, and also seeing if people would want to interact with that stuff. We're still in those kind of you know, minute phases of like, you know, live videos on Facebook, and people are kind of not quite sure. They're like, oh, is this a live video? Are you actually in the studio now? Or, you know, is this just something you recorded and you're posting? So there was a lot of that kind of reaction as well. Like, oh, are you actually doing this right now? Oh, okay. You know, so yeah, I just think it was interesting.
No, it's pretty incredible, especially because I imagine there's definitely a lot of footage out there of people laying down the live vocals, instruments, all that kind of stuff. But for me, you know, I've gone out in there and actively looked for it. And it was just really interesting because it shows you there's still a little bit of wiggle room in the studio, that you're still kind of considering, hey, does this work? Does that work? It's not like everything's absolutely set in concrete at that stage, which I think a lot of people would perhaps think that it is, that you're just going there and just rattling out what you've already pre-planned. But there's kind of some little minute stuff that gets changed in the studio. Talk a little bit about that kind of experience, what it's like to be in the studio, singing for a couple of hours, you know, just that general environment.
I love it. So I kind of love that. The studio for me is one of the most amazing places to be when you're recording your album, when you get up to that point. It's just, I think also with any kind of major event in anyone's life, there's kind of a little bit of a lead up or a little bit of a self expectation as to how you're going to perform when you actually get into the studio, you know, like you maybe a bit of self doubt or whatever. Am I going to be okay? Am I going to do what I actually want to do? Am I capable of it? You know? So for me, all of those things leading up to the studio are a massive battle, you know, like part of the reason why I did the live video was, you know, to kind of prove to myself that everything's okay and that I can do this, you know. Going into the studio, I was prepared. I did know what I wanted to do, but I love the creative aspect of being in the studio. There's a lot of other things in my life that are very, you know, rudimental. I have to do it this way. It's set in stone, you know, like, but with music, you know, I also love that sense that anything can happen, you know, and the studio is a very good place to do it because it's not really great to surprise your bandmates on stage with doing something random, because that could freak them out on stage or put them off. But the studio is a really great place to experiment with stuff and to really be creative in the moment and give it that one final creative hit to see what happens. And then, you know, it sometimes even changes again after that. You know, when it goes into mixing, it becomes something different again. It becomes a different monster. So, yeah, I love it. Studio's amazing. Highly recommend it. And I think it's, you know, it's nice to be able to share that with people as well, to go, this is what it's like. This is what, you know, the experience is like when we step into the studio.
Sort of stepping back from that ever so slightly, what do you do to prepare on the day that you're going to go track some of the vocals for the album?
Well, I kind of like to strip back the rest of my life. So if I'm preparing to go in for vocals, say in a week's time, I maybe prepare quite far ahead with my other work or with other things that I have to do in my life. So get all my other work out the way so that my sole focus in the week that I go into the studio is just the studio. So you can't always, there's other things that come in life that, you know, come sideways at you. You can't always prepare for everything. But I like to prepare down to the, you know, down to the what am I taking into the studio to eat and prepare and make sure I have lots of sleep, make sure that I'm eating well, that I'm really healthy, so that I'm able to get everything out of my voice that I want to get out of my voice by making sure I'm well rested. So that's really important for me. It's different for everyone, I think. You know, you might see some singers on stage, you know, they might scull like 3 bottles of wine and still be sweet, you know, like, and they can rip out those notes and stuff. But I think I like to have very high expectations and try and meet those expectations. So the only way that I can do that is to be in really great health. Yeah.
Another aspect of the vocals, obviously, is the words you're singing. How do you go about approaching writing those lyrics to fit the music that you've been making?
It's a bit vice versa. So sometimes the lyrics are there and then the music gets created around it, or sometimes parts of the lyrics are done and then, you know, then we go back and readdress it later. But generally for me, it's more about a feeling. So I'll get kind of a feeling from a riff or a half-finished song, or even sometimes a finished instrumental piece. And then I'll just say, okay, this feels like. And the feeling could be like, I don't know, a colour, or it could be like a sad feeling or a hopeful feeling or a science fiction-y feeling or whatever, you know, like I'll just create some kind of story in my head from what that music is. And then just build stuff from there. So the lyrics are a very important part for me. I spend a lot of time on them, and if I can't get them right, I don't force it. I leave it, and then I go back to it. So it's hard. It's not anything specific like with the lyrics. I just like to listen to the music. Sometimes I sing while I do it, or sometimes I write the melodies at the same time while I'm writing the lyrics. But yeah, often it's a little bit of everything all at once.
There's one track on the album, The Pursuit of Desire, which features Evergrey's Tom England. How did that come about?
It was from the actual piece itself. So it was one of the final pieces to get finished. Sometimes I suppose, like in anything, like you just hit a roadblock, and that song I hit a roadblock in. I couldn't finish it the way that I wanted to finish it. You know, like it just wasn't doing it for me. You know, like I was trying all different things, and then all of a sudden this vocal that I did was like, this feels like it should be a duet. You know, like I felt like I was performing it where I was kind of singing in quite two different styles. The lyrics became kind of like two people talking, and then I was like, well, hang on, I think this should be a duet. And to check, I said to Jason, the bass player, you have to come over. I need you to record some male vocals for me. I've got them ready, but I just need to see if this is going to work. So he came over and, put his own spin on it. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. You have to do it. And he's like, I'm not singing in this song. And I'm like, oh, Jason, come on. And so that's how it came about. So I was trying to get Jason to sing it, and he was like, no. So I'm like, well, who's going to do it then? So, we started just talking about who would fit the vocal line, and Tom was actually the first name that came up that we wanted to contact. So we contacted him, and he said, sure, I'll have a listen and then I'll let you know. So he had a listen to what I'd recorded, and he goes, yep, no worries, I'll do that one. So, yeah. And then he sent back the vocal. I was like, oh, this is cool. This is working now. So it was a bit of a progression of stuff not working, then trying to get Jason to do it, and he wouldn't. So, yeah, we're like, oh, okay, cool. Let's see if we can get a different vocalist. So I think it turned out really good in the end.
about this sort of broad category of music is that instead of just having like a featured vocalist who'll do a couple of lines, there's back and forth between you two, and then there's the melody in the chorus, and it just kind of it brings something better together rather than just putting someone in just for the sake of putting them in. It's actually it means that there's a reason for it to actually be there. There's a reason for there to be the two sets of vocalists.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think, well, when the song started actually working, because I didn't think it was working just with my vocals. And when the song started working, I just kind of felt like it was not it. I don't know about what everyone else thinks or what everyone else gets from it, but it wasn't ever intended as a male-female relationship love duet. Or it's more intended as two minds coming together and maybe like kind of giving advice to someone, I suppose, like chase the passion, feel the fire, like two people that are kind of in agreement of giving the same advice to somebody. That's where that kind of comes from, I suppose. So yeah, I don't know whether everyone gets something different out of it, but hopefully everyone can get their own ideas from it rather than taking what I say it was written about.
The album's mixed and mastered by Jen Bogren, who also did Liberator. Why did you guys want to return to him and have him mix and master it the same as the previous album?
It was a no-brainer. It was absolutely a no-brainer because for us, the experience of I'll never forget when I heard Liberator for the first time come back from Jens, and I was like, oh my God, this is just unbelievable, like he took our mush of sound, like literally it was a mush of sound, because we had all these things going on all at once, and he gave everything space. And I know we have a lot of stuff going on in our albums, like we just kind of like chaos, I suppose, but yeah, like just all of these different things happening at once, and he's able to give it space. And in that sense, you can hear where the drums sit, you can hear where the keys are, you can hear the bass, you can hear the guitars, and you can hear the vocals. And they all have a place, and they pull back and come to the front when they need to. And I think that is a really awesome sign of a good mix. Like it's what you want your mixer to do. Hey, like, mix it so that you can hear everything that needs to be heard. And he just gave it this beautiful touch without, I mean, we obviously gave him some direction of what we wanted here and there, but he went way above and beyond what we ever thought we would get back. And so Liberator was just like, we were blown out of the water. We thought he did an amazing job, and it was a no-brainer for us to go back to him again for the uncovering. So yeah, and again, we're really happy with what we got back from him. So yeah, we just think he's a genius behind the mixing desk. So we're like, hey, we'll just keep writing the albums and send them to him because he makes them sound amazing.
The title of the album, The Uncovering, where does that come from?
It's a lyric. So in Prisoner, it's a lyric from Prisoner. It wasn't, everything was pretty much written before we even titled the album. So it wasn't written around that song or that lyric or anything in particular, but it just fits as an overall title, I suppose. It kind of fits in with a lot of the themes throughout the album. And it just so happened that we actually went looking for a lyric within our music that would suit the title of the album because we didn't have one. So, and that we kind of voted, I suppose. We put a few names forward and went, what will work? And The Uncovering was the one we all liked in the end. So, yeah, that's how it came about.
And what about the artwork? Who did it and what was the brief for it?
James Ledger did the artwork. The brief for the artwork was a whole heap of collection of images of stuff that we liked. So Jason took the reins on this one and showed us all of these images that he collected, and contacted a few different artists. Jason found James Ledger and said, hey, really, really like your stuff. Would you consider doing our artwork? And yeah, so James produced some really awesome stuff, and we loved what he produced. Our brief wasn't necessarily like, hey, we want this, like we did brief in the sense that we said, oh, can you add a little bit more green here, or we want a little bit more this, or we want the DA logo somewhere, or we'd like some images in the booklet, but we didn't actually give him a specific brief. And I like that too, because as the rest of the album is a creative process, I like to give artists or other creative minds the ability to do their thing. And often if you give people that freedom to do what they're good at, they'll do it really well. And I think that James did an amazing job on the artwork. And so, yeah, I don't really want to hinder people on what they do, and want them to enjoy the creative process as well. So, yeah, I think it turned out really well, and we're really happy with it.
So the album's getting really good reviews, obviously, because this is a really good album.
Oh, thank you.
Whose job is it to look for reviews, and is there any nerves coming up to that process when they start coming out?
Oh, that's nerves. Looking for reviews. So our label sends us through a few of the reviews, or some of them I think we might miss, like some are in magazines and overseas. But yeah, we kind of keep an eye out on the internet to see if anything's coming up. But a lot of people will tag us, like tag Divine Ascension if they post it on Facebook or the web. Luke's really good at that. Our drummer Luke, he's really good at finding all that kind of stuff, and he'll just kind of post it all on a group for us to have a look at. In terms of reviews, look, I think it's really, really awesome to get people's feedback. I like hearing the good, I like hearing the bad, I like hearing all of it. I want to know honestly what people think. So there's been a bit of a mixture, like there's been good reviews, there's been some negative feedback as well. And I'm happy to take it all on board, and just again push forward and improve myself as a musician, as a vocalist, as a songwriter, as a performer, as whatever. So I think though the most amazing feeling is when you do read a review and that person just says amazing stuff about every single song, and that's a really nice feeling, like to kind of get that gratification, I suppose, from the years of work that you've done putting this album together. But what I get really happy reading is just if someone sends me a message and says, hey, I've been listening to the album for a month, here's the review. Like the whole thing that they gave it time, whether they like it or not, that they're actually giving the creative mind time, I suppose, to really hear and, to really listen and make an educated decision after listening for a while, rather than just maybe listening once and going, meh, not my thing, So, I respect that. I think that's cool.
One track that I wanted to kind of get your perspective on was the last track, Vultures. Interesting track, short track, finishes off the album. talk a little bit about how that came about and what the kind of intention is behind it.
So it's actually a middle section from another song that's on the album. So it's, well, I don't, it's not, it might not be obvious. It's from New World. So there's the track New World in the bridge section, that melody, the whoa, 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 that's runs through New World. And in that song New World, I did write Vultures in there. So all of those lyrics and everything, well, not the second verse, but the first verse was in there as part of the New World song. And it was too much. Like, the song needed, I do tend to put a lot more in songs than needs to be there. The song needed some breathing space. Pulled out the lyrics in the bridge, they didn't fit and they didn't work, and it wasn't necessary. But as we were going through this process of writing more stuff for the album, Vultures just stayed in my head. Like, the lyrics that is now Vultures were just in my head. I couldn't get it out. I had to actually lay it down to stop it from going round and round my head and being really annoying. So, you know those songs that really annoy you, that sit in your head for like a week, that you can't get rid of, and then you have to listen to something else, to get that out of your head, and then that sticks in your head for a week. That's what Vultures was like. So it just literally stuck in my head and would not leave me. And I could not move forward with anything else until I got it out. So I recorded it down very simply and threw it as an idea to the guys. And they were like, yeah, this is cool. We could make it work. And then it was Carl that actually went to town on the cinemascope, I suppose, like the all the sound effects in the background of the song. It was very, very simple when I gave it to Carl, and he just created this kind of awesome, ambient, eerie kind of sound behind what I'd done, which was cool. I really, really, it kind of pulled me into a movie scene almost when I heard what he'd done. And in a sense, it ties the album together. It may seem a little bit out of place at the end, but yeah, there is kind of little references in Vultures that refer back to other pieces on the album.
That's really, really cool. I want to ask you a couple of questions kind of about your backstory, because I was reading the bio on the website. Really, really interesting how you kind of got involved in this particular style of band. So, start off sort of in the beginning, when did you start singing?
So start singing probably when I was singing probably when I was about 16. I was always, when you're a kid, you sing everywhere, but I didn't actually know that I could sing until someone told me I could sing. So I had a music teacher tell me that I could sing. I played instruments, and didn't really sing until late teens, and then I kind of started finding my voice in when I started having singing lessons at 16. So started training in opera, and I didn't love it. And I said to because I actually went to a school where I got a music scholarship, and I said to my music coordinator, I don't want to learn opera. I don't want to learn from that teacher, because it's very, very, very formal. I don't have any freedom to do what I want to do. So I learnt opera for about 9 months or something like that. Did all the vocal exercises and conconis and all of that stuff, and said, no, don't want to do this. So then I moved. I didn't actually move teachers. I stayed with my opera teacher, and she she took me through a jazz syllabus to do my year 12. So that's kind of my backstory, I suppose, with music and with singing. Like I don't regret now working with the opera teacher, because she was really, really good, and it would have been bad if I actually had have lost her as a teacher, but I was a bit of a stubborn teenager, I don't know, and I thought I knew what was best, but my music teacher actually knew better than I did. With actually moving into Divine Ascension, like moving into metal music, I worked as a singer for a little while. So I worked as a singer and dancer on cruise ships and in cabaret shows and that kind of stuff around the traps. Started working in a rock band. And I finished or was doing a composition degree at university while I was traveling the world and working as a dancer and working as a singer. And I kind of wanted to challenge myself with orchestration, and I thought, okay, well, it's one thing doing it at uni, but can I actually do it in the real world? And I thought that was kind of what I was going to do. I was going to start writing music for my career. And so I thought, well, what do I need to do to be able to do that? I need to start working with, working with different people, and maybe I'll see if I can write in a band situation. And so that's when I found Divine Ascension, or what was to be Divine Ascension. And heard some very cool stuff and was kind of drawn to the music. And it wasn't until I actually met the guys and they gave me some albums that I'd heard European metal music. Never heard it before. Always was singing like jazz, musical theatre, cabaret stuff. That was my world. And absolutely loved it. I think one of the first albums I listened to was a Within Temptation album, and I was like, whoa, what is this? This is cool. So that's the long-winded backstory.
It's really, really interesting, because just coming from because the really key thing about a lot of people who enjoy this category of music is they get interested in it when they're a teenager, and usually like 13, 14, 15, and it becomes their whole world, and then they go on through their life. But it sort of struck you much later in life, and you've gone on to be a singer in a metal band. And really, really fascinating. What was it that kind of drew you to it, especially having been interested in musical forms which are in a lot of ways quite different from heavy metal?
It was kind of more so the composition side. It was more writing the music that interested me, not necessarily performing, because I was getting my kick performing, in other bands, and getting my stage time traveling and all of that kind of stuff. So being drawn to the metal music was the technicality of the music, and the instrumentation, the orchestration, the polyphonic rhythms, all of the really cool stuff that like absolute music nerd over here I was just loving it. I'm like, oh wow, and now do this. So I just was very interested as to how it all fitted together, and the soundscapes that you could create, and this wall of sound that was created when, even from the start with Divine Ascension, it was just like this. From the first rehearsals, it was this wall of sound. It was just unbelievable. And it was just something different, I suppose, and again, a challenge. And I started to find my feet in the genre, and, kind of still kept, I still like to listen to all different styles of music. I'm not just purely, like metal all the time. I love listening to all different kinds of music. But I think that metal is an amazing genre. heavily underrated. And it's sad that Australia kind of hasn't really found metal as a very popular genre, not anywhere like what Europe finds it, but maybe one day. Let's convert Australia.
We can only hope. So what have you been watching, listening to, or reading lately?
Oh, that's exciting. Well, I have been listening to, I got a whole heap of metal music, which I've downloaded and I'm listening to. But I'm absolutely loving, I don't even know if it's pronounced right, Vur. It's a Finnish band. It's like, it's VUUR. I think that's how you say it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I've been listening to them. I've been listening to some Arch Enemy at the moment. Evanescence's new album, Delane, Cobra and the Lotus, Epica. Just anything really also that I come across. Like I'll find a band that I really love, and then I'll put on like Apple Music Radio and then show me bands that are like this, and just listen through and, just kind of enjoy lots of different stuff, as opposed to what I listen to when I'm writing, which is pretty much I try and close myself off from all new music. So I don't know. I know that it's probably impossible to not be influenced by other people and to not steal ideas, but I am totally paranoid that I will steal some random line of someone else's song. And so I try and close myself off from new music when I'm specifically writing melodies, so that I don't copy melodies by not even knowing that I'm doing it. But in this phase now, when I'm just having a bit of a break from writing, I'm listening to as much as I can. And I am listening to a lot of metal music at the moment. But yeah, I'll have my days where I'll just kind of move to something else. But I love discovering new stuff. I think that's really, really amazing when you find something really cool that you love. Reading, not really reading much at the moment. I'm just crashing, falling asleep. My life's too busy.
And I just want to finish off. Do you guys have any plans for any shows in the future?
Yeah, we do, actually. But nothing's set in stone. So I can't say to you, hey, come along to this gig on this date. So plans are, let's try and get around to as many places in Australia that we can. Would love to, kind of do a little bit of a mini tour. Where that takes us in Australia, not 100% sure. It will depend on money and how much it's going to cost to get everywhere. It's often quite expensive to tour. And what's going on as well around the time of when we're actually able to tour. A few of the guys in the band, two of the guys in the band are school teachers. So, it can be quite hard when you're trying to tour and juggle full-time jobs. You don't want to lose your job, essentially, because you don't want to, you need something to come back to for financial purposes, because you don't make a fortune when you travel and tour. You often put the money back into the band for more recording, more travelling, more touring. So to pay the mortgage and to support the family and to do all of these things that need to be done, we all have jobs. So it will depend on timing, what other bands are playing at that time. We don't want to rain on anyone else's parade, And, so hopefully 2019 will bring us around Australia and somewhere overseas. Who knows where yet? Let's throw the cards up in the air and see what comes back at us.
strive to know the beast to slay, to hold at bay until we lay. Evermore, better days, striving for perfection. Here we learn that only strength will survive. If you ask, it's a question of obsession. Break us down, but you won't take us alive. We have gone the distance. We have walked upon your shores. We hope you remember what all the pain was for. When there's silence, we have gone the distance. We have walked upon your shores. We hope you remember what all the pain was for. When there's silence, wanna tame this world of our creation. In the end, when the darkness sets in, he who wanders far shall surely find his heart's desire before his time. Evermore, oh, you are not alone. Far from home, I'm not afraid. Evermore, we will strive to catch the beast to play, to fight the pain until we lay.
That was Evermore by Divine Ascension from their new album, The Uncovering. Before that, we heard Vultures, and the first track during the interview was Pursuit of Desire. Thanks again to Jen for talking to me. Really, really interesting chat, particularly the end section. I find that fascinating because, especially for me, someone who is one of those heavy metal loyalists who's always basically been in the genre, I have other interests, as I think I've sort of demonstrated with some of the other bands I've interviewed, like Bear the Mammoth, like Lage. But, you know, I'm a heavy metal lifer, and to have someone who with a different perspective come into it, particularly her interest in composition, that's fascinating because, you know, not being a very good musician and not focusing on those aspects as much, just more being a fan, just somewhere in my gut. It's interesting to hear someone talk about it like that. I'm not sure whether I'm going to have another interview later this week, but if I don't, I might release my Lords of Chaos rant that I'll eventually edit down to something a little bit more palatable. But I hope you join me later regardless. If you've got any questions, comments, send me an email, australianhunger@gmail.com, or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I monitor all those. Any bands, let me know. I'm happy to consider an interview. Thanks so much for joining me. Bye. But one thing just before I let you go, Jason's beard, very impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let him know.
I'll tell him you said that. Like he'll. Yeah. Oh no. I'll tell him he has to listen to the podcast because there's been something that's been said about his beard.